Chinese President Xi Jinping has long made no secret of his desire to reunify Taiwan with mainland China, and has not ruled out the use of force to achieve his ambitions. Separated by just a sliver of sea known as the Taiwan Strait, China is 267 times the size of its neighbour. Its population is 1.4 billion to just 24 million, and its defence spending of $225 billion dwarfs that of Taiwan's 19 billion. So why haven't they invaded yet? Well, the tiny island has an ace up their sleeve: the Silicon Shield. This preventative measure is of such global importance it's seen countries like the USA declare that they would come to Taiwan's defence should they face occupation. So what is the Silicon Shield and how does it work? Well, before we get to that, it would help to understand how and why tensions have risen between the two countries. Following defeat to communist forces in the Chinese Civil War, the surviving Republic of China government fled to Taiwan in 1949, annexing themselves from the mainland. Until 1987, it was governed under martial law by the Kuomintang, one of the two current major political parties on the island. Taiwan held its first free legislative elections in 1992, since when power has been transferred peacefully between the Kuomintang and the Democratic Progressive Party. Prior to this, from 1683 until 1949, Taiwan was under Chinese control, barring a brief period between 1895 and 1945 where the island fell under Japanese rule. Beijing has never recognised Taiwan as a sovereign nation. In fact, it's only recognised by 13 other states. China will not do business with anyone that recognises Taiwan, and this is not just isolated to diplomatic ties. Perhaps best evidenced by Hollywood's ever-increasing reliance on China, whose film market has grown over recent years to become the most influential in the world. Upsetting the country can result in a film not being screened, and this can prove decisive as to whether or not movies make a profit. Even the stars of a film can affect whether or not it will be shown in the country.
我做很多采访，很多，所以在一个采访，我有一个错误，所有人。
That was John Cena's public apology for referencing Taiwan as an independent nation, just prior to the release of F9 from the Fast and Furious franchise. Despite China's refusal to accept Taiwan's independence, relationships between the two had remained relatively cordial, with both states agreeing to a consensus in 1992 and further strengthening ties by opening up trade in 2005. However, following the 2016 Taiwanese election victory for President Tsai Ing-wen of the Democratic Progressive Party, disagreements over the contents of that consensus have surfaced, giving rise to mounting tension and an ever-increasing Chinese military presence on the border between the two countries. Beijing's view is that Taiwan is a renegade state that needs to be reunified with the mainland. President Xi reiterated in 2019 China's commitment to reincorporate Taiwan back into the fold, using the one country, two system formula similar to Hong Kong. Given recent crackdowns on citizen freedoms in Hong Kong, Taiwan is less than warm to the idea. Since 2016, China has carried out military drills in Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, as well as its navy, the biggest in the world, frequently patrolling the Taiwan Strait. Recent visits to Taiwan by US political figures Nancy Pelosi and Kevin McCarthy have only provoked the situation further, with China retaliating by increasing the frequency and scale of these operations. Beijing's threats have not just been limited to military, with Taipei also reporting that China has attempted to interfere with their elections and performs thousands of cyber attacks against the Taiwanese government every day. Given all the aggression shown, surprisingly, China is actually dependent on Taiwan. And this is where the Silicon Shield comes into play. China needs chips, and lots of them. Microchips, that is. And there's one place in the world that makes the most advanced: Taiwan. Sometimes called semiconductors, they can be found in all electrical devices from cars to mobile phones. They're created in huge and expensive fabrication plants, or fabs, which operate on a 24-hour basis producing and developing them. Chip research is a continual process, obeying what's known as Moore's Law, which dictates microchips halve in size and double in power every 24 months. There are three types of microchip: memory, logic, and advanced. Memory, as you would assume by the name, stores data. Logic chips process information. Think of them as the brain of the electronic device. Advanced chips are more powerful and much smaller versions of logic chips. In fact, they are incredibly small, less than 3 nanometers in size. For context, 1 nanometer is around 50,000 times finer than a human hair. They're used for high-performance tech like smartphones, supercomputers, and AI-based systems. Advanced chips are made by only two companies, South Korea's Samsung and the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, abbreviated to TSMC. The latter of which produces over 90% of all advanced microchips worldwide. Being the largest global exporter of electronics, China desperately relies on a steady stream of microchips from Taiwan, as their industrial sector accounts for just shy of a third of their economy. It is this dependency that the silicon shield refers to, at least the silicon within the microchips. And it's not only China that relies on Taiwan, but the entire world. Recent events have illuminated the world's dependency and why ensuring its survival is critical. Without straying too far into the weeds, during the COVID-19 pandemic, supply chains were affected because of a shortage of semiconductors. This can be evidenced in the automotive industry, where car production fell by an estimated 7.7 million vehicles in 2021, costing around $210 billion. In theory, should Taiwan come under attack, other countries will come to their aid to protect their access to these crucial microchips. In response to the shortage created by the pandemic, countries around the world have announced plans to invest in and build up their own fabrication plants, most notably in the US, where President Joe Biden announced the CHIPS Act, which dedicated $280 billion over the next 10 years. China too has declared ambitious plans to boost its own chip production capabilities and has aggressively attempted to poach Taiwanese talent by offering huge salaries and benefits. Building fabrication plants capable of making advanced microchips is only part of the challenge. Production requires a collaboration between global players, each nation as crucial as their counterpart to the process. Think of TSMC as just the contractor in this chain. Companies like Intel and Apple in the US design the chips, which are sent off to fabrication plants for production. High-precision equipment is built by a company in the Netherlands called ASML. Specialised chemicals and materials are imported from all over the world. Even engineers and technicians who operate the fabrication plants are in short supply. Should access to any part of this global ecosystem be restricted, it would become effectively impossible to produce advanced microchips. Cue the USA. In 2018, the USA issued export controls on the sales of advanced microchips to China, including the equipment that can manufacture them. The controls were applied following China's development of advanced AI weaponry, which could be employed against Taiwan should they invade. This presents a huge problem for China, whose economic ambitions have stalled until they can resume supply of the advanced microchips they so desperately need. With regard to Taiwan, the US acknowledged that there is but one China, and that Taiwan is part of that. Acknowledge being the key word here. The US rejects the use of force from China towards Taiwan, and they retain the right to defend Taiwan in the case of invasion, whilst not actually committing to do so. The United States' main objectives had been to maintain the status quo, and by extension continued peace and stability in the region. Biden appears to have strayed from this line, stating on multiple occasions that should China invade, the USA would respond with military action. To emphasise the point, the US has increased its naval presence in the area and routinely carries out joint exercises with both Taiwanese and Japanese military forces. Many experts, including the US Defense Department, believe a Chinese invasion of Taiwan inevitable. How imminent that may be is more contentious, with dates ranging from 2027 through till 2049. although most experts do agree that it would be unlikely to occur before the close of the decade. In the face of invasion, Taiwan has been advised to embrace a porcupine defence. This strategy relies on smaller portable arms dispersed throughout the country rather than larger mounted weaponry. The theory being smaller portable arms are harder to target and can cause considerable strategic damage, slowing down enemy advances until external help can arrive. If this sounds familiar, it's because it was the strategy employed by the Ukrainian military in resisting Russian forces. Targeting key infrastructure like bridges can slow the enemy's progression to a grind. War would be costly for China and the US also. The Center for Strategic and International Studies ran what it claims was the most expansive war game simulation ever conducted. Assuming the US will come to the aid of Taiwan, they conclude that though the Chinese invasion would be prevented, US military forces would suffer heavy losses, with multiple tens of thousands dead on all sides in just a 3-week period. The study concludes with the rather ominous note: victory is not everything, and warns that war could in the long run prove to be more costly for the US than China. Should China gain control of the island, there's little chance the fabrication plants would survive the invasion. Nonetheless, if China was to secure the plants also, the global ecosystem would present further challenges. In an interview with CNN, TSMC chairman Mark Liu said no one could take the company by force, because the factories are connected in real time with the rest of the world. Losing access to the vital engineering software and updates, diagnosis and chemical orders would render the plants inoperable. Some experts believe the recent attempts to globally diversify semiconductor production, like the US's CHIPS Act, weakens the silicon shield, though TSMC are not among those, and for good reason. Given it takes 3 years to build a new fabrication plant, Moore's Law, as we touched on earlier, dictates it will be 12 months out of date by the time it's completed. Couple with this the cost of at least $20 billion per fab. Rather than compete, it makes more sense to think of these efforts as a contingency plan should supply chains suffer again. One potential solution suggested to ease current tensions with China could be to relax the export controls, so long as China was willing to commit to a less threatening posture towards Taiwan. This is unlikely without a change of Chinese leadership. Experts in the main believe that China will launch an invasion against Taiwan. Agreeing on when has proved a sticking point, although most agree it will not be before the end of the decade. If China invaded, casualties would number in the tens of thousands. Microchip production would cease potentially for years to come, impacting global economies drastically. A 1-year disruption to semiconductor production would cost global tech companies approximately $600 billion. Regaining parity would take at least 3 years, and another $350 billion. That being said, experts doing the most agree that the silicon shield will hold strong for at least a few more years yet. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and leave a comment. And for more videos like this, subscribe to the channel with new videos uploaded weekly.